Hi, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Great to be here. Great, we're all here. So before we get started, I just want to present and kind of frame the context of sustainable materials of what we're talking about here today. So some of the most polluting materials that we use and live with include concrete, steel production, plastics, glass, batteries, the list goes on and on. How can we make a dent in the use, manufacture, and reuse of these materials? Enter the stage sustainable and novel materials, which have a more reduced environmental impact and create more circular life cycles. But like anything, it takes a village and an entire ecosystem to help bring these materials and novel materials into the market. You have the investors, you have the inventors, the innovators, the customers, the regulations, the incentive, the list goes on and on. And what is the right recipe to bring these sustainable materials into adoption? What needs to be considered? So some of the things that we're going to be talking about today with our incredible panel is the energy used in the production of materials, waste management and landfills, regulations and incentives for corporations and startups, and also the financing models that can support and scale these incredible novel materials. So today, we have three very active players in this field who are going to be joining us and leading a conversation on this important topic. We have Adital Ella from Criaterra, a startup in this field. We have Ricardo Osiroff from Shapir, which is one of the leading and largest construction companies here in Israel. And we have Jack Levy from More VC, who is one of the, I'm not going to say the word oldest, but one of the longtime climate investors. Oldest is not a good word.
It's a very good word.
With the most experience, definitely not the oldest, with the most experience in this field. So thank you for joining us. And maybe you guys can each give just a brief introduction of who you are and what you do. I'm going to start with Jack.
Sure. So Jack Levy, it's a pleasure to be here. Indeed, we started a firm called Israel Cleantech Ventures in 2006, and we're among the first people that were focusing on investing in what we called clean tech, now climate tech. Fast forward, and because it has been extremely difficult, and sometimes we've also expanded our horizons, and now under the name More VC, we invest in things beyond climate tech as well, but we still have significant climate tech investments, including Carbon Blue, Groundwork Bioag, and some others. I'm going to talk a little bit on this panel about some of my experience investing in the materials sector, but just to wrap it up, we manage basically $275 million across 3 funds, and I'm thrilled to be here and to see the revitalization once again of this resilient ecosystem.
Thank you, Jack. Adital.
Yes, so hello everybody, I'm Adital Ella, founder and CEO of Criaterra. Criaterra is dedicating its times and effort to bring to the world the most sustainable circular building materials. We are creating building products that are produced without going beyond the boiling point of water. They achieve the strength of concrete and yet are produced while saving 90% of the energy and 80% of the emissions. And we already have our first product, which is market ready, which are sustainable wall tiles.
Thank you. Ricardo.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ricardo. The name and the accent give me away, so I'll say straightforward. I was born in Uruguay, so we don't get confused. I'm an engineer with several degrees in different types of engineering, with 40 years of experience in many, many different things, but construction. But 3.5 years ago, I joined the Shapir group to establish and now manage the group's innovation center focused on construction and infrastructure. Our job is actually to identify, promote, and then implement technology being developed by young Israeli companies, which of course have some type of synergy with the very diverse activities of the Shapir group. And I'm looking forward to participating in this panel and discovering many new technologies.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we're going to kick off our panel with the startup on our panel, Criaterra. Adital, if you can just tell us about the mission and vision of Criaterra, of what you've founded, and especially in the context of the importance of sustainable materials. Thank you.
So yes, of course. So I started my journey actually in the late 90s, where I really understood the gap between the way we approach industry to the way I kind of understood a way should be carved into finding a way to produce products in general without applying the chemical change, the very high heat, and the very strong force in order to create products that are actually detached from the biosphere, detached from the ecosystem, and are by definition non-circular. So I really embarked on a journey to find and explore how we may approach industry in a different way. And one of the keys that I identified is really finding a way to take firing out of the equation. So most of the building materials today are created by firing minerals, incinerating minerals in very high temperatures, 1200 degrees, 1600 degrees, and so on, in order to create the chemical change that achieves constructive strength. This is true for ceramics, this is true for cement and many other building materials. So our wish was to really find a way to take the firing out of the equation, by that to save all the combustion emissions and also all the process emissions, to preserve the natural carbon capture process that we are all aspiring for, but actually nature created in the first place, and also achieve a fully circular technology, which is, again, an inherent character of natural materials, but we are designing actually out of that. So Criaterra was dedicated from day one to creating the most circular, fully natural technology. And after a long journey, I think we are really there, because we were guided all along in a very, very honest way by achieving the most sustainable, the cleanest possible building material for the market.
Thank you, Adital. So that's interesting. So you're really focused on the process and the manufacturing process, because when we look at materials, it's not, it can also be the actual material that's a problem, or actually the process which is causing the emissions. And
so actually, Criaterra is innovating from the level of the molecule to the industrial scale in order to really bring an innovative, clean, honest solution. You really have to innovate in every little aspect,
right, like from A to Z.
All along
Yeah.
the chain. And
Yeah.
only when you do that, and that's a lot
Yeah.
of work and a long journey, but only when you really challenge every aspect of the life cycle of a product, you can really say, I'm bringing to the world a clean, circular product.
Right. Thank you. That leads us into Ricardo, because if we're talking about long cycles, right, and we're looking at corporates, you at corporates in general will take the product from A to Z and really look at the product from the initial stages of the development all the way into adoption into the market. So we would love to hear about what you guys at Shapir are working on in terms of sustainable materials, maybe some of the products and projects that you're working on.
Sure.
If you could just tell us about that.
Well, let's put on the table the grim numbers. Okay, construction and construction materials are responsible for up to 10% of all global emissions. And if that is not bad enough, then the operation of the buildings that we live in, shop in, work in, are responsible for almost another 30% of emissions. So, as you can figure out, the construction industry has a lot to do to make an impact on climate change and reducing the effects of pollution, energy waste, and so on. As a leading group in Israel, we put this in our focus, and we do very different activities. We do invest in startups that bring some type of innovation in that respect. I could mention two of them. StructurePal, a startup that has developed optimization procedure to reduce the amount of concrete and steel being used in construction. And of course, if you don't know the number, each ton of concrete creates 1 ton of CO2. So every ton counts. A second startup that I could mention is BMatch, and that's our marketplace that helps developers and general contractors to choose from available services and products the ones that are more sustainable, that have less of an impact on climate change. Other than the investments that we do, we also initiate our own programs, some of them in-house, like recycling waste from our quarries. Others might be with groups or academia outside of Shapir, again, trying to reduce the amount of polluting materials that we use in construction. At the national level, we have initiated a very big consortium of academia, engineering companies, technology companies, and industrialists to develop what we call the next generation of construction materials, where, again, one of the main points is to reduce the amount of pollution and emissions that our industry creates. So hopefully, all of these activities together will jumpstart, okay, a new generation of, or a new way of doing the things that we have been doing the same way for a very, very long time.
Thank you. So you guys are, wow, you guys are really doing a lot of work in this field, and you also work on pilots and you also invest? Did you say you've invested in? Okay.
Yes, we do.
Okay, interesting. So on to investing. Jack.
We have 2 investments together, so.
Oh, really? 2?
Yeah, Seption and StructurePal.
StructurePal also, okay. So many different aspects to look at to approach PLANETech, right? The software and not just materials. Okay, so Jack, you've been on the forefront of climate tech, clean tech for quite a long time now here in Israel. If you could tell us a little bit about what you are looking for in terms of novel materials, sustainable materials, what works, what doesn't work, what do you think would be catalytic?
So the challenge always is a combination of what I'm, I guess, personally interested in and what I think fits my fund model. It's a challenge. What I'm most personally interested in, I think, remains energy storage. I think that's the materials around energy storage. I think that remains the holy grail. Could be large scale energy storage, thermochemical. For example, I'm talking right now to 2 founders who have a patented process around that. But it could also be, at the battery level. I'll get back to whether or not that fits my fund model. But I think these are the key things that the world needs to really take significant steps forward, because intermittent power we have from the sun constantly, and we just have to find ways to store it. The second thing that always interested me is, and maybe because my father's a chemical engineer, from Cuba, by the way, not from Uruguay, but we've talked about that, is plastic substitutes. And particularly, I think, I always have this image of the very, very, very thin, I think it's PET bag or high density, or, that holds a watermelon, right? I mean, we all love our watermelon. We're going into the season now. And just think about the incredible power of that polymer and that bonding. And yet we know how problematic it is. I think it's like the best inventions of the 20th century, right? It's the famous line in the movie Plastics. Think about our world without plastics. And on the other hand, think about our world now with plastics. And I think about it as a father, or as, sometimes my kids' greatest strengths are their greatest weaknesses, and that's never going to change. And I think us too as a society. So the challenge is, how do I take those 2 personal interests, which I have no doubt that if you are the entrepreneur that attacks those problems, you're going to bring something incredible to the world. And the challenge is, how do I, from a fund perspective, where do we finance it? Who finances it? How? The last panel addressed a lot of that. I can come back to talk about that, but I'll stop there. But in terms of the question of 2 areas that interest me significantly from a materials perspective,
Right, that could be catalytic to the industry as well.
Those are two that interest me significantly.
Okay, thank you. So we'll come back to the next part of that later. Okay, question for all of you, and when we think about materials, and you can all kind of approach this from your, corporate, startup, investor perspectives that you're coming from, what do you think are some of the challenges and barriers when introducing a novel material, a sustainable material into market? What should some founders, we have some maybe new founders or earlier founders here in the audience, maybe people have an innovation they're thinking about starting, what should they be aware of? Or people who just generally really care and they want to see new materials introduced and there are certain barriers of entry and challenges. What's happening that we don't know of, that we don't know about?
Maybe I'll jump in with a bad story and then we can get some. So first of all, I think the last panel on a financing side had some excellent comments, and in terms of getting progressing not only with the technology side, but progressing with the business side in parallel, and you really have to build one as you build the other. And offtake agreements, commitments, things that you can show your investors so that you can constantly get the next funding raised for the scale up that you're going to need to do for the manufacturing. But the story that I want to share, and I'll share it briefly, is that sometimes there's an extra challenge with materials, which it's not only the fact that, especially if it's a first of its kind, that's going to require a novel manufacturing process. So I was involved with a company called FRX Polymers, not an Israeli company, but we backed them because they were competing against Israel Chemicals, and so we knew the area. They were competing against the brominated flame retardants that Israel Chemicals make, which are very, very bad for the environment. Israel makes them because they come out of the Dead Sea. We have a good source for them. But they're essential. They're essential to our life. If you've ever seen, God forbid, a plane go on fire, the reason why people survive is because of the flame retardant chemicals that are everywhere in that plane. They're everywhere. They're in this microphone. Any power electronics associated with plastics, has flame retardant chemicals in it, as does this carpet, etc. So it was a big market with a big environmental problem and a novel polymer invented by an incredible scientist with major patents around it. So everything from the last panel sounds good. Then we got non-equity funding to help back it. We got a great facility built in Antwerp, which the government gave us, $20 million, effectively, somewhere along those lines, to help sort of build a facility. But where did we fail? Sometimes with a material, it's also the value chain that you're selling it in. And so the sales cycle to get Apple to design our flame retardant chemical on the epoxies resin that's in the circuit board in this phone, that might be 7 years. And that's what I learned. And so I think that now this doesn't mean don't try it. It depends very much on who you are and the financial challenges that you have and the commitments that you can get. Absolutely try it. That's one other challenge that I wanted to add to the mix. It's not only the cow, it's like, how do you get designed in, and how do you know that you're getting designed in? Now, I think maybe you have a bit of a different story because there's beachhead markets and there's lots of ways to approach this problem. But that was a challenge.
The value chain, you're actually saying that, the entire value chain and
Correct.
life cycle of
We
the
were
product.
not even selling to, Apple wanted the product. They really did. They wanted to be able to say that their iPhones are halogen free. It was like 2 steps away from the iPhone homepage. It was really important. But we needed the circuit board guy to design it, and the epoxy guy to design it into the circuit board, and then us. And that process was just too long.
Thank you. Adital, do you want to share your...
Yeah, so first of all, I think we really have to realize this is a multifaceted challenge. So I like to address it like a spiral where even from day one, you have to have this top view of the spiral and understand it has so many layers you have to take into account in every step that you take. It's the layer of R&D, it's the layer of funding, it's the layer of marketing, it's the layer of regulation. I mean, and more and more. So you really have to, from day one, really have this top view and understand that the journey is really creating this 2-dimensional spiral into a 3-dimensional spiral that finally takes the product really into the market. And one of the key challenges is really understanding, once you have a new material, what's the right first application to be a vehicle of bringing it to the market. So for example, with Criaterra, we early on understood that we have the properties that are relevant to build the building block for any building, and that's a 1 trillion product in the market. So it has a huge impact to the impact that Ricardo was describing. But we also understood that if we start from a masonry block, probably the company will not survive because the level of challenges in that spiral are just too big. The gap between what Jack described, between the material and the market was just too big at that time. So this is why we decided to start with the wall tiles. There are many raised an eyebrow, as we say in Hebrew, which people relate to as non-impactful enough. If you really look deeply, actually, ceramics is also a very impactful market on the environment. But people refer to tiles as a kind of not very important product.
Well, it's a collective effort, right?
Yeah,
it's,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it could be 0.5% or 1%, but I
But
think we're at the
it's way
point now in the
more,
world where everything makes a difference. So wherever we're able to move the needle and make a dent.
It's actually, some people claim it's about 20% of the impact of materials within a building. But what I'm really trying to get to is that the point is that tiles are driven by the innovators of designing a building, which are the architects. They're the ones that can really push new materials in, where masonry blocks are driven by the engineers and construction specialists and so on, which tend to be way more conservative. So addressing your material with a product that can really bring it to the market quicker when the adoption is easier, and then later on bringing the next products after we have our product already 5 years in installations. We are building our full-scale industrial production. Now I believe there will be a lot more openness to exploring a product like a masonry block.
And the initial product is much higher margin, I would assume.
Yes, indeed. Of course, it's a whole different story from economic point of view, for sure.
Thank you. Ricardo, do you want to add anything from the corporate perspective to this?
Oh yeah,
the challenges.
I could speak on challenges for a very long time, being a materials engineer and having gone through the cycle of developing a new technology, a new product, and then into the market. I'm very well aware of what's ahead. And if you are a founder of or working for a company developing new materials, then you have a very long and hard way ahead of you, but also a huge opportunity at the end of the road. There is no larger market than the construction market. It's, I don't know, anything between 12 to $15 trillion market. So the opportunity justifies the effort. Now, to get to the challenges, introducing a new material is a long process, and you really need to make sure that you are ready for a very conservative and unforgiving market. You need to be very thorough on the data that you gather. You have to be very clear on identifying all stakeholders and bringing your vision of how are they going to make money out of your product. Okay, everybody needs to be very clear on how they're going to be taking advantage of your product, because replacing existing technologies and products is a very long and hard process. And assuming that you have overcome these two hurdles, the technology and the financial model, you need to be able to scale up to the size of the construction industry, because nobody is going to be buying your product unless they're very sure that there is availability of the product at the scale that they need it, at the timetable that it's required. Of course, reliability, and of course there are considerations of regulation, because this is a very regulated industry, and you need to know that in not all cases, but many cases, new materials, new products need to be certified and approved by regulators, and regulators vary a lot from market to market. And finally, being a founder myself in the past, a couple of advice maybe: don't overpromise, better you overdeliver. That's one. Two, spend a lot of time and effort on identifying and learning your customer, really working hard to make the most of what is called product and market fit. And thirdly, as I said, this is a conservative market, risk-averse market. Although it's very common in startup pitches, stay away from revolutions and disruptions. These are scary buzzwords for construction companies. Go for seamless integration, for solving thoroughly one problem that we have. So that's it.
Thank you.
Other than that,
Other than that, no, it sounds like a piece of cake, right? Sounds easy. Ricardo, you just mentioned now, know your customer, and I think that's an important fact. And I think beyond that also, and this is something, Adital, you're probably very focused on as a startup, is really understanding the market and product market adoption, product market fit. Beyond that, especially in the construction industry, right? You have regulations, there's incentives. What is the missing for all of you? And you can, feel free if anybody has anything to say on this point. What do you all think are the missing ingredients in terms of incentivizing, and also with respect to regulations, especially in that framework, and helping these companies come to incentivize, especially with, price parity is an issue, and it's really hard to break through with regulations and actually having the right incentives. What's missing in the ecosystem?
A carbon tax. I mean, that's clearly what's missing. It's not, I studied economics under Ronald Reagan's chief economist. This guy was not a liberal. Okay, Martin Feldstein, may rest, I assume he's passed away. And he taught me about externalities, and he said that externalities need to be priced into the product by regulation. It's pretty simple that if we understand that we have a problem, we need to price carbon into the products. It's really as simple as that. All of us as citizens have a role to play in that. I mean, we're as investors, as entrepreneurs, we're doing our things, but all of us as citizens have a way to demand that. When Bennett went to meet with, to go back to better political times, or sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but okay, when Bennett went to meet in Glasgow, I wrote a little mock thing, which I didn't put into the paper, which is sort of like, why don't you just not go there and talk about Israel as startup nation and blah, 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 and try to make us look good? Why don't you go there and make an announcement that we're putting a carbon tax in Israel? Do something really bold. No, we can't afford it. We can't be the first. We can't be but that's what the world needs. Sorry, end of the political point.
It's an important point. We all have to take responsibility. Yeah,
It would make every startup, every innovation, allow us to compete on a fair playing field.
So that's definitely a very, very important aspect. In addition, some of the regulations are really stopping the ability to really bring new materials to the market. The most significant example is that many masonry blocks require applying cement into the material in order to be approved as a building block. So you can find these outdated regulations that really are blocking the market to change and to adopt new products. So in this case, we really need huge collaboration of all players in order to press changing the regulations. That's very, very critical.
So really keeping up with the regulations with the innovation that's taking place, right?
well, yeah. It's always adopting new technology is a question of carrots and sticks. And Jack started out with a big stick, taxation, but I prefer to get started with carrots. For example, all government or government agency tenders, including a requirement for sustainability. giving actual emphasis and priority to sustainable solutions. Government can lead by example, and they are very big there are very big projects that can make a very big change. Secondly, I think government could not only tax, but also incentivize. Incentivize circular economy. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are billions, not billions, but millions of tons of construction waste created every year and dumped in places where there is no additional place. We cannot use these materials for constructive purposes because, again, regulation is so, and there is no infrastructure, and it's a chicken and egg. Since regulation doesn't allow for it, there is no infrastructure, there is no innovation there, and we keep on hurting our environment using new natural materials. Thirdly, they can do a lot of things in terms of regulation and standards by just adopting standards from advanced economies, the US, the European, the Japanese, the Australians. They are decades ahead of us, and just by adopting their standards, we can actually release this big innovation push to innovate in the field of materials. And last word, I would float an idea that I've been toying with a very long time, is that we should establish, Israel should establish a national construction industry development laboratory fashioned after the US national laboratories, which are responsible for some of the biggest breakthroughs that have created the advantage that the US now enjoys.
This was a great discussion. Thank you for everyone for joining. And thank you, PLANETech.
Thank you, Maayan.